Hello and welcome to What is this weapon? Or should I say, what is this bizarre accessory for this weapon? The weapon, of course, is the famous StURMGEWEHR. This one literally is one because it's written on the side StG44. But generically, we of course use the term for the whole family. We've talked about that a bit before. It's kind of not the main focus of this episode though. It's the bit that's hanging off the end, which a lot of you will have heard of, and some of you will know something about. You may even have seen it in other videos. It's in a couple of books, most notably Dieter Handrich's excellent book, StURMGEWEHR, ! Which has really the best information available on this. But what it didn't have is this version. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Just for those of you who aren't aware, and you probably intuitively grasped it even if you're not, this is a device for shooting round corners. So some time ago we covered the American, I'll say knockoff, of the Krummlauf bent barrel in German device, which this is one version of, and that was a simple U-shaped channel that was curved to just slew the bullet around. And that was for, although the Americans did experiment with infantry versions, that was primarily intended for armoured fighting vehicles. So it would stick up out of a hatch, and with a periscope, you'd be able to keep guys away from your tank. I don't know, it might put a sticky bomb on your tracks or otherwise cause mischief. And ended up not necessarily working that well, but yeah, they pivoted to different guns instead. Didn't adopt it. I should also say this wasn't adopted either. This is purely experimental. Now, the different approach with this, so the Germans did experiment with a curved channel and decided that the most efficient way to do this, if you do have to shoot bullets around corners, is a complete curved section of rifle barrel with rifling. One of the problems there is you're attaching this to the end of the muzzle. How do you have the bullet jump the gap in a way that doesn't completely mess up accuracy or even damage the bullet? They sort of figured that one out at one point. But anyway, and also change of pressure build up around here. Come back to that as well. But they decided, nope, in for a penny, in for a pound, we're going to do essentially a true curved barrel attachment. They were already working on this primarily for the armoured fighting vehicle application when Hitler decides that they need to be able to shoot out of trenches and around corners potentially. Trenches was the primary motivation for designing this though, by the way. Not so much the shooting round corners. It's really quite prohibitively awkward and heavy for that, but you could do it. Mainly it's for shooting up and over things. Anyway, Hitler on the 8th of August 1944 puts out an order, or demands an order be put out, for 10,000 of these, or devices like this, for infantry. Slight problem there is that only preliminary work had gone on and there was no design available to put into production. So cart before the horse there from the Führer. Needless to say, that that focused people's minds into developing working prototypes, and by September they're developing them, and by October there are designs ready to trial. And they are developing in parallel the Vorsatz PZ for Panzer, so they're doing the 90-degree version for shooting out of tanks, and they do make 550 of those for trials. This thing doesn't get that far, as you'll realise as we go on. So this version is and this is in the title, StURMGEWEHR Vorsatz Infantry, or SGVI, or SGVJ for short. The I was rendered as a J in the Gothic script, so that if you read the two different versions in different places, that explains why. It is an I for infantry. There was also an experimental 40-degree version at one point as well, so splitting the difference between 90 and 30. But what ends up being developed is, well, this series and the tank version. And the tank version is the more steeply curved, clearly. So both of those design streams are being worked at Rheinmetall Borsig, Rheinmetall, company that exists today, of course, at Unterlüß. Hopefully I've got that right. And Bruno Schulz is one of, if not the main engineers on the project. He's the one that the Allies sat down and debriefed at the end of the war, and we have a copy of his account of the development of this thing. So I dove into that hoping to find answers to why is this one different? Because this one is different. If you compare this to any of the other videos out there, I think Forgotten Weapons has covered it. Garand Thumb did a shooting video with a Krummlauf device. They all are of the same design. It's this vertical, almost shield-looking design. It's slightly canted forward, but much less than this. It's taller than this. And it turns out, I did figure this out from reading the archival material, that's because it uses prisms as its sighting device. So the famous Zeiss company, known for their optics, their cameras, etc., provided all of the sights for this development. The rifle, there was a rifle team at Heinel that were involved in developing this as well, by the way, but primarily at Rheinmetall Borsig. So Zeiss providing all the optics, and they start out looking at mirrors. So the classic schoolboy, I guess, not necessarily schoolboy, but mirror at the bottom, mirror at the top. You know, we've all played around probably at some point with periscopes. Used in tanks, of course, famously. First World War, they're using them, standard sort of tube optic periscopes with little round lenses, top and bottom, mirrors I should say, for peeking over trenches, handheld or mounted to weapon mounts. We have one on display here at the museum at Leeds. It's the most obvious way to do it. And what you'd be doing is, as you can see on this one, reflecting the sights. So if I look through this, and then we'll look through it together, effectively, through the magic of editing. So what we're seeing through here is obviously a view of the floor as I look at it now. We'll try and get you something a bit more meaningful to see on camera. I see the tip, well, the whole, I guess, depending on how I'm holding it, the front sight on the curved barrel, and then we have an auxiliary rear sight, essentially, at the front of the mirror assembly up here. And then the bottom mirror is showing me that image over the top of my rifle's iron sights. So it's not involving the two sights on the rifle at all. And in the course of development, they tried fitting sights in all sorts of crazy places, including on the helmet of the soldier himself. All sorts of versions were looked at, and they're detailed in the StURMGEWEHR book, the excellent Handrich book. But again, the only thing that wasn't, and it's through no fault of his, because it doesn't appear in the records anywhere, the ones that survive anyway, is this boxy contraption here. This is a pair of mirrors. So this is the same concept as the early version of the Krummlauf, but it's not the early version, because the early versions are described and illustrated in this report, and it's not in there. And they actually moved away from mirrors. So Schultz's account, it goes from pair of mirrors, like a box periscope, to a block prism, so a big solid block of glass reflecting the image through itself, as it were. It made it to, so the mirrors were a problem because they cracked. The first version, it wasn't robust enough. You could make it, I guess, robust enough, but it was found to be, that made it too heavy. So they go to the big block prism. That was definitely too heavy. Robust but heavy. And then the missing link, I believe, is this. But according to his account, they then go to the two small block prisms, which is what will be buried inside that housing that you'll have seen on the Krummlaufs that you have seen and that I have seen. This isn't that. This appears to be the missing link between those early box periscope style sights and what they settled on before the whole project was abandoned, essentially, which was two triangular section prisms mounted in that tall housing. I hope that makes sense. It didn't make a great deal of sense to me when I was looking through the archive. So they start out with mirrors, they go to a big lump prism, they go back to, I believe, a pair of mirrors, but in a slightly slicker, more robust housing than they had previously. I believe that's what this is. So very late 1944, and then even later 44, early 45, what's on the table is the version that we see. The main version that Allies got hold of and tested, I think Aberdeen Proving Ground did some testing, the British did some testing. Unfortunately, I haven't found a proper trials report on that. So still a little bit of a mystery, but I think that's what this is. I can try to compare. I can't side by side because we don't have the conventional version complete, but we do have an incomplete version. So if we put those side by side for you on camera, same curvature, same setup. This is utilizing the standard grenade launcher attachment that they chose for this. So it's just like a giant wing nut with two flaps, as it were, that wrap around the barrel behind the front sight post on the STG, and then you clamp it down. In fact, let's take it off, show you what I mean. So great big lever, forwards for tight, back for loose, obviously. In other words, a conventional screw thread. So we unwind this, and at a certain point, it'll flip open, and that lets us, trying to be gentle with this robust piece of military hardware, but it is a museum piece. There we go. Off it comes. So that's your assembly. This is hefty in itself. I'll put this on the scales for you and let you know just how heavy it is. But you'd be expected to carry this in your pack wherever you went, such that you could fit it to your StURMGEWEHR. And just before we leave the rifle, on this one, and I don't know if this is perhaps an original testing example or if it's one that was rebuilt for Allied testing that we don't have details of, but either way, it does have an unthreaded muzzle. Now, there's a mention in Handrich's book that there was an experimental version where there was no threading on the muzzle on the rifle, so perhaps that's what this is, or the Allies at least found some barrels and built the rifles. I can't confirm that. The most prosaic explanation is that this is indeed a Krummlauf prototype specific StURMGEWEHR. Anyway, slight difference there. Normally that would be threaded with a thread protector for any accessories that did get adopted. Grenade launcher, maybe suppressor, whatever. So I'll set that aside and just try and show you the design differences. So I won't obviously take this off, but this sighting assembly does come off, and what you're left with is this quite forward angled platform. So clearly at that angle, mounting platform, whereas on the, dare I say, conventional version, it's a much more upright mount. Well, the base is welded on, and we've got our rear sight there, our auxiliary rear sight that would be reflected in this case, prisms, and we're missing the prism sighting assembly that sticks up here. But you can see that it's a much more upright angle. You might argue that this design's superior for peering up around things because it's lower to the weapon. It's not so low that you can co-witness the sights, as you will have seen from our camera angle. You do look over the top of your rifle sights to see the auxiliary sights. So what you're getting there is a very short sight radius compared to what's on the rifle, but nonetheless enough for close quarter fighting, which is of course what this is. Well, not necessarily what this is for. If it's a periscope sight for trench fighting, you do want it to be accurate out to 300 meters, and this is tested at that distance. Now, your bullets might be going sideways by that point, but you could in fact hit a man-sized target at 300 meters with it. They discovered in the development process. So it's a shame that the one we've got is incomplete, but we're very fortunate to have essentially what appears to be a one-off survivor anyway, prototype. There is in the debrief documentation it's a photocopy of a photograph, but I'll see if we can show you it anyway. There's something approximating this, and I don't know if it's the first generation. I think it's described in the documentation as being the first generation mirror device, or the first one that was practical enough to actually test with at any rate. Similar to this, but it's a different shape. It's not this one. So that's what I mean by missing link. They both have this gas sleeve. So they discovered early on that the curved barrel induced a buildup of pressure at this point in the barrel, causing excessive wear. And so they fitted a sleeve with optional positions. So it can be fired closed. It can be fired with the 2 ports lined up there with the ports in the barrel itself, or you can expose all the ports with this oblong opening here for maximum gas relief. Not entirely clear why that was necessary or how practical that would be for issue to the troops. And there is a spring detent on here, quite robust actually, for you to choose those options. So that kind of detail, I think we're lacking. Other differences, so the standard issue one had a threaded attachment on its auxiliary muzzle, as it were, for fitting a grenade launcher. Because believe it or not, it wasn't just for shooting bullets over and around things, it was for shooting grenades over and around things, which I don't fancy, but nonetheless, that was the requirement, which is not on. Another reason that ours is different. It just has a normal curved gun barrel, you know, like you always have on a rifle. There's one other feature on this, which is on the, I guess would have been the pre-production version, the version you see everywhere else. There are strips of this on that as well. In this case, it's a strip of corrugated steel that runs around the whole box there. And as far as I can tell, that is for inserting bits of foliage into. So Tommy doesn't get too concerned when he sees a small shrub that he didn't see previously, I guess. I don't know. You've got to try and disguise this thing. This is lower profile. It's painted a sort of deep green colour, I think, actually. Or is it just black? I only say that now that I'm in the sort of studio lighting. I think it's just black, actually. Yeah, this would be less obtrusive, poked up over a trench. It's not much taller than the front sight on the thing. The version that would have gone into production, or I guess troop trials at least, had it got far enough before the Germans realised they had bigger problems on their hands, that would have stuck up further, hence the need for a sprig of foliage, although it's on this one as well. This is another reason that I think this is pretty fully developed. They must have gone back to, either as an insurance policy or as a sort of second-guessing thing, they've gone back to the idea of a pair of mirrors in there. So a little bit of previously undocumented history there. You won't hear about that anywhere else because the official documentation doesn't mention it. It's a case where only the material culture tells us that there's a little bit of the story that was missing. So time frame there on, I believe, this last gasp of the mirror sight coincides with an order for 1,000 to be made of the Prism version, so not this, but that was cancelled with only 100 that actually made. There was a trial plan nonetheless with the 100 that were made against a more conventional trench periscope system. So just, in other words, just go back to handheld, look where the enemy are, then pop up and shoot them, I guess, was the idea. So that trial would have gone ahead 31st of March 1945, but was cancelled. Things were getting a bit fraught by that point, I guess. So not even that trial of the 100 even went ahead. So in case you're wondering about the effect of the curved barrel, well, as we know from the M3 trials, the bullets do get distorted coming out. So with the 30-degree version, which of course is what we're here really to talk about, it did affect accuracy. You could hit somebody at 300 meters, but it's no, beyond that you haven't got much of a hope, I suspect. The other problem is barrel wear. So a few hundred rounds, if you want to be able to hit a man-sized target at 300 meters, after that you're going to have problems. 3,000 rounds barrel life maximum. So I guess at a more deliberate rate of fire, something like the barrel would maybe last for 3,000 rounds, which isn't a huge amount, and you're sacrificing accuracy. Arguably, the few hundred rounds is the meaningful figure, because if you can't hit something out to the effective range of the weapon, what's the point in having it? So that's the device itself. We're very lucky to have this apparently unique version of this thing. If anyone knows of another one in another collection, let us know. And if by any chance you're aware of any more details on this version, again, do let us know. I just want to finish on an amusing anecdote to do with not this rifle, because we used a deactivated rifle for this for reasons that will become apparent, but this very device did come travelling with me down to the BBC studios in London to film an episode of QI at least 10 years ago now. We actually did 2 episodes for that series. Very exciting for those of us around then, because a lot of us were fans of the show. So this was Stephen Fry presenting, sort of comedy. It's called QI, stands for Quite Interesting, for those of you who haven't heard of it, perhaps in other countries. Entertaining, informative show. We were very happy to support it, and it was good. Profile, kind of promotional stuff for us as well.
This is a genuine article. It's brought to us by our very nice friends from the Royal Armouries in Leeds. It's going to spend the night in the Tower of London tonight. And this is this extraordinary...
You shoot over the trench.
You shoot over a wall or round a corner.
But it did require travelling with an object, and we had to sit in the audience and sort of wrangle this thing and watch. And there was an amusing incident with Alan Davies wanting to hold it and being told he couldn't, and which came from the producer actually asking me if he could hold it. And I hesitated. I said, maybe with gloves. And he went, no, it's fine. You say no, that will be great for the show. And it was a funny moment.
Don't play with it, because they did ask that nobody else touch it, because it is very valuable, I'm afraid.
I was going to make it go over the desk.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I can't believe
they did. I'm afraid I was given specific Alan not to touch it instructions. It's very valuable.
I love the fact that somewhere there's a memo that just says machine gun for Stephen Fry's use only.
Another funny moment was at my expense, because when I showed up with this thing to the floor manager and guy to be responsible for taking a photo of the thing to put on the big screens behind the cast or the guests, and he asked me if he could hang it off fishing line, and even the rifle is a bit too heavy for that. So I said no, and I was thinking of options, and he sort of sizing me up and said, "Can you do your jacket up? Where's this going?" And long story short, or not that long, but story short anyway, I ended up on the big screen, I think it was behind Alan Davis, holding this thing with the Krummlauf on the end, with a German helmet photoshopped over my head. And he'd wanted my jacket done up so it looked more like a tunic.
This is a periscope, and so if I'm here, I can actually... I assure you, it has been deactivated, I promise you. There is no chance. It's been checked and double-checked, but I can see the audience in my... And I can see the sights as well in the periscope.
Yes,
so
it's been converted into a
I am
waterer
pointing
for
at the
flower baskets.
back row of the audience, and that allows me to do that.
So kind of got his own back from me getting all curatorial with him about not hanging it from fishing line, but that would not have gone well. Anyway, so that was one of my early TV appearances. Actually, was as a photoshopped mug holding a Krummlauf. The following year, I came back and wheeled a Vickers gun in front of Stephen Fry, so that was maybe a bit better for my reputation.
But there it is. It was in about 1943 it was invented. They started making them in 44. It's too late. Jerry didn't win the war, as you probably know. We gave him a bit of an old spanking, as a matter of fact.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. As always, remember the YouTube things. Like, subscribe if you're not already. We do have a rather exciting exhibition coming up. 28th of June, it's Gladiators, Heroes of the Colosseum. You won't see many guns, but you will see some cool stuff. That's on for 6 months. Come and visit us if you can to see that. Otherwise, we'll see you here again next week.